No? I got two different computers on my email.
So how'd you end up finding out about that? Jenny called you today?
No, I found out up through the back door. I figured she didn't want me to come and ask a lot of questions.
Holiday station.
Clarence knows a lot of stuff.
Darn right. He keeps abreast of everything. Well, I see Nancy's here, so we could get our meeting started, I guess.
You sent this out to all of us,
So you got the, are you pedaling under the desk so the tape's turning and all that? Okay, thanks, Donna. Well, I'd like to call to order the special council meeting. It is Wednesday, October 17th, 2018, 6:02 and a half minutes. We are gathered right now to discuss and hear an update on how the proposed 2019 budget is coming along. So I will turn this meeting over to our city administrator, Jenny Max.
Thank you, Mayor Heidman. Good evening, members of the council. If you could just go to the very last page, if you would. I provided some packet information for you tonight at your seats there, and I will walk through an update for the council for the 2019 budget. As a reminder, yes, please. As a reminder, last month when we met, we discussed the budget, and that at that point in time, a balanced budget was going to equal a 13% increase in our levy from 2018. And that the recommendation was to set the preliminary levy at a maximum of 9%, and that we would work internally to get that at 9 or below 9. So the good news is that we are just under 9% at this point in time. So we are on your last page is probably the fastest spot to look at that at a high level. It says number 2 at the top right corner. It's reflective of an 8.71 increase from our 2018 levy. I'll go through some of those bigger ticket items as well, so we can talk about them. But so good news is that we were able to get there. I'm not sure how much more we can go, but staff will certainly work to look at things and to see if there are any areas that we haven't looked at fully. But we have spent some time in looking at the budget and looking at those bigger changes from last year. So at least that's a positive where we are at this point in time. So I feel like I need a mouse. Can I have that mouse over there? Because sometimes I feel like I want to move the page. Thanks.
Okay.
So I will go through the memo that you have has updated information in red. So that's what's changed within the budget since the last meeting in September. Items A and B that we talked about last month for our wages and our debt service, those are set, and those are reflected in the budget. That was just over, I think, 5.2% for those two items to begin with for the budget. For item C, that was in reference to the county road projects, and initially we had included $50,000 as a budgeted line item based on the upcoming road projects from the county that we are expecting over the next 5 years. I did itemize those projects for you in red. We're going to have the CSAH 1377 intersection for next year. The CSAH 13 project, the middle section of that county highway, will be coming up. CSAH 115 Nashway Road will be coming up within the next 5 or 6 year period for the city. And then I also just mentioned that there are potential road costs relating to the Grandview Lodge expansion and the traffic study that we haven't stepped through what all of that will look like yet. But those are 4 big projects and lots of things happening within the city potentially over the next 5 years. Yes.
I haven't had a chance to read this very thoroughly, but
Yep.
you say take 50,000 out of the current unreserved account.
Yes.
Well, if you take 50,000 out, what's left in that account?
What's left in our unreserved account? We have a sizable unreserved account, and so that wouldn't, for me, that would not be concerning as far as not leaving enough money left over.
Oh, in dollars, how many dollars are left over if you take the 50,000 out, like you're recommending?
We have just over $4 million in our unreserved account.
Seems to me we could work on that a little bit.
And that is part of our process as far as, mid-range planning, longer-range planning, because I think there are needs we need to assign to that. So yes, so getting to that, as far as we would still fund this need, starting with 50,000 in a assigned account for these road projects, and I still included 10,000 in our budget for next year because I do think we should start to keep funds in that account with these road projects can very quickly amount to large sums of money.
But if you've got several million in the unassigned account after the 50,000, why do you need so much? Let's put it that way.
Why do we need so much in an unreserved?
Yeah.
Actually, Don, I think we should maybe look to set up a workshop and have a discussion about that and not get really sidetracked with that right at the moment.
Well, I'm just bringing up the question because if we took out more than 50,000, took more out of the unreserved, we still had several million left over, that would help our bottom line. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think once we get through this, this may be more addressed.
Okay, I'll listen a little longer.
Yeah. No, thanks. No, those are great questions. Any questions as far as the recommended, including 10,000 in the budget for next year, setting up, beginning kind of that dedicated fund for county road projects? Any questions or concerns along those lines?
If I may, if we don't add the 10,000 this year, what does that do to our? I mean, if we don't add 10,000 additional for starting to set that off to the side, maybe I hate to say look to next year if we can start it then. What does that do for us at additional 10,000?
Nothing really, as far as just you need to start somewhere and getting that in the budget, and at some point you have to get it in there. So honestly, whether it's 5 or 10,000 or it would be best practice to get it going.
The reason I asked the 10,000 because then on the next item that you'll talk about.
Yep.
So that's why I brought the 10,000 up. So go ahead.
So Jenny, just one quick question then.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying we take 50,000 out of our reserve, and then every year that 10 goes in. That'll become in the budget yearly.
Yes.
So we start building that fund up. So
Yes.
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to be clear.
Yes.
And did we not last year start, or in the past, did we not last year increase what is going into that fund also?
Into which
Road
fund? We do have some funds aside, but those are for city roads and projects, trying to manage those needs. This is, of course, these are not our roads, but we are impacted at this current time with the county cost-sharing policy as it is, that if there are road projects within our city, there could be some cost-sharing potentials. There could be land acquisition costs for trails if we want to have that conversation. So there's just some of those unknowns that we want to start to plan for a little bit more.
Okay, so
There's also areas on the county roads where, because it's in the city, Tom was explaining, sometimes you curb and gutter for water direction, where the county doesn't need to. And we would pay for that because.
That's a county policy that they do that. They've had that policy for 40 years. My point on, well, that's a different issue, but my point is if it's a county road and they need to do it for the county road, they should pay for it.
Let's not even start on that road.
It's not the
Okay.
first in agreement there, Don.
Oh, yeah.
Moving along.
For the next item, item D, with regards to our plow truck, what I did was I removed that line item amount, that was $31,000, and I am recommending that we assign, taking those funds from our unreserved account right now and moving that into a dedicated account for a future plow truck, which is what was done before for this current one that we bought this year. So that would be the same practice, and we would then take this item kind of off the table as far as we have the need accounted for in 10 years when we need to make the purchase. And we should hopefully, 300,000 should be a really good ballpark as far as how much funds are needed.
And Jenny, could you just,
Yeah.
with that 300,000, is that taking a guess at inflation over the next 10 years, or is that?
It is,
just
yes.
to help us all?
Yes, absolutely. So we bought the one this year for 220,000 or so. Kind of looking at a 2.5% inflation, that gets us right about 300.
So will it be put like in a CD or something?
Yeah, that was my question.
So that would be currently the account we had for this current plow truck that we purchased was just in a money market, but depending on whatever best interest we could get, because we wouldn't need to use those funds for quite some time, we would look to do that.
But
Yes.
taking it out of the reserve fund doesn't add to the levy, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Taking it out of the reserve doesn't affect the levy at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're basically moving it from one bucket to a different one and saying
Right.
this is the dedicated purpose for it, basically. So between those two items, then that gets that dollar amount up a little bit more as far as utilization of that unreserved funds, which is fortunate for the city to have. And so we should look to utilize those when it makes financial sense to do that.
Question that ties a little bit to this, Jenny. Do you
Okay.
have any sense at all right now with the 2018 budget, if there would likely be any small amounts of monies left over anywhere that would, and I'm not asking for anything too specific, but are you feeling, do you have any feel for it, or is it just way too early to know?
So far, I would say, in looking at departments individually, I would say that everyone is tracking pretty consistent with their budget. And, we have some things that, smaller projects, like the TIF project that came through over the summer, we will get reimbursed for those costs before the end of the year. Same with traffic study costs and some of those things. So as we work to kind of finalize that, right now we see more expense on our side, but working to clean those up before the end of the year. But I would say overall, I think our departments are doing very well and keeping on track with their budget. No major surprises or anything. And I don't think any major underspending that would lend itself to, a big,
Thank you.
yeah.
So on that specific line item, highways and streets,
Yep.
the initial budget had 699,193.
Okay.
This one has 618,193.
Okay.
So it's a difference of 81 grand. So is the 81 grand what we were going to be putting aside for the truck?
No, the 81 grand was the 50,000 for the county road reserve, and then the 31 for the
okay,
plow truck.
Okay.
Yes.
This was the one from September. Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great.
So, and I hate to belabor the point, but on the
Okay.
plow truck then, so then that becomes a non-line item on the budget, period, it's gone?
Yes.
Or are we going to go back to that?
Nope,
No.
nope, we wouldn't need to
Okay.
readdress that at all.
All right.
Yep. Item E, planning and zoning part-time employee. Initially, that budgeted line item was $15,000. Just doing kind of a rough guess last month about summer work help and number of hours and trying to get just kind of an idea of where we would start with that. I have reduced that to $5,000 for 2019. I had a conversation, I've had a couple conversations with Sourcewell and utilizing them and their expertise and trying to create efficiencies for our department, helping to streamline application processes, doing things online, some of those needs, and seeing if that really would help improve the efficiency and the flow of the department. I honestly don't know at this point if that would even cost any money at all. I tend to think it will not. They're pretty good about providing those consulting services for the city, for cities in general. But if there was some cost associated, that would be included in this $5,000. And then if we still felt after working through and making some of those changes that we needed some assistance, there is an option. Sourcewell does have an internship program that they say could provide a lot of, whether it's administrative support to help free up some of other time for our planner or what that might be. There's options there. Otherwise, we do have reserves to make that decision if we feel like we need to next spring. But this would be a good first step, I would think, if the council would agree with that. So, any
I
feedback?
certainly agree
Okay.
with that.
Okay. Okay.
We are quite behind in a lot of the actions after you grant a permit with conditions. You go out and check and make sure. Those always happen in the spring, summer, and early fall. If you could some way reduce it so you could spread it out and do stuff in the wintertime, that would be helpful, but you can't do that. We've had people in here from Grandview complaining about why aren't we looking at the permits. It's just a lot of stuff going on this last year with Grandview and taking up a lot of time. And I was thinking if we had this help just for 1 year, for 6 months, we could clean up a lot of the stuff that we haven't had a time to do anything with, get back on our feet, so we enter into next year, we're on a more of a level playing field. That was the reason. And the Planning Commission said, yeah, they felt that was needed too. So I'm arguing for it. I'm one of 5 here. I just want to let you know what I think and what the Planning Commission thinks. Part-time help, 6 months, one-time shot in the summer.
Part of my conversation with Sourcewell, just to speak to a little bit, was that this request, the Planning Commission request for help with code enforcement, is actually becoming a very common request that they're getting from a lot of area cities. So they are trying to also look at bringing on someone from a staffing perspective that then may be, an option for us to utilize to some degree as well. But they said, even an intern, they've had success with just that follow-up, meeting conditions, taking pictures, verifying, documenting, closing the file, those types of things would help meet that need, but also not be, much of an expense. So that is something they are seeing. It's common around the area too. So I definitely agree. Support is needed. Just want to step through it the right way.
We thought at all about NJPA? Would they be?
That's Sourcewell.
That is Sourcewell.
Yes.
Oh, did they change their name?
They did, yeah.
Should have known
Took
that.
me-
That answers the question.
Never mind.
But I think if we do need to hire somebody, especially if it's for 1 year, I would certainly be comfortable taking that out of the unreserved
Okay.
and just getting caught up. If that's what needs to be done, then.
Okay. Okay. Item F, Planning and Zoning Attorney Services. So I spent some time looking at what our current budgeted line item is for that, how much we've spent, and looking at the initial request from last month. I don't even remember what it was. But we still have some room in our current year budget for that amount, and so carrying that budget forward for next year, I do feel that is something that I would like to see our planning and zoning department utilize more to help answer questions on the front end, have more of a dialogue with them, but we may not, we may be able to use within our current budget levels. So I did take that out for next year. But I would still like to see that improved in some way.
I would agree.
Yeah, I've talked with a couple commissioners about that
Okay.
and encouraging them to, if it's needed, to utilize that service. to help them.
Yep, great. Okay. Item G, the police squad car. I have included for a regular meeting tonight, the request to make that purchase for our 2019 squad car. The original price of $37,000, Chief Taylor was able to decrease that to $33,500. And so I think that's an adjustment in the engine that would still work for the squad cars. And
Mr. Mayor, a question. I'm looking for scraps here. Is there any way that we could prepay this out of this year's budget so it doesn't have to come out of next year's budget?
Are you aware that there's monies available?
Well, I'm just asking if there's any way we could do that.
possibly, I could look into that and see if that's doable.
That would help lower the levy for next year a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I can look into that and see if we can. I don't know. I don't
I
know
just
if-
raised the question
Yeah,
if it's
right.
possible. Yeah.
Right. I don't know if the dealers like to get the funds when likely the vehicle won't be ready till June of next year, so that might be
But
an
if there
issue
were
for them.
monies available
Can we
from
dedicate them?
an item this year that
Yep.
could be set aside.
We could set
or
those aside,
dedicated.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, if there was money left over. Okay. I'll look into that.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the question I had earlier about if there is potentially any unused dollars from this current year's budget.
Prepay stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because otherwise it ends up going into the unreserved fund, which we could certainly be drawn from there as well.
Well, I'm still looking at 8.97% increase. That's-
The last two items, H and I, well, the item H is the Parks Department truck. There's no change in that request or budgeted amount from last month. And then just the other miscellaneous items that round out that total increase percentage. No change in those. There was a question last month regarding the potential to transfer additional monies from our liquor fund to help lower the levy. At this time, I don't recommend doing that. We have seen over the last 2 years an increase in our personnel costs with the introduction of the salary schedules. From my discussions with Brian and Terry, they're seeing increase in cost for their inventory. And so I don't know how they're working through as far as maintaining certain margins and things, but I think that's something that they're trying to kind of balance. And there's also legislation that was introduced in 2018, and I think will come back around in 2019 that could have an impact on liquor stores. And so with that unknown, really, I'm not quite sure where that really will go, and we'll know more probably in the next 6 months. I would say that we should probably leave that transfer amount to the same amount as 2018. However, I will say that it should be important for us to look at what that fund balance is for the liquor fund, and perhaps look at what is that threshold of, if it exceeds a certain amount at the end of any given year, we take that excess and transfer it to the general fund for some, future use. So let's just say there's $500,000, I'm just using round numbers, and at the end of a given year, we have 550, we take 50,000 and we move it back to the general fund, and we know that they have enough for any issues or anything like that to operate, but they don't need to keep building and building. We can use that for city projects and things like that. So I think that would be a good thing to look at for year end. But as far as the budget, I would say that we should leave that amount for now. Does that make sense?
What basically are they looking at this year? They keep reporting that they're having a good year. And
Yep.
what's the year-end total look like? Do you have any idea?
I do know that they've had a very good year as far as sales, but I believe in the budget as far as, or last year, I think there was somewhere in a 15% increase in just personnel costs alone. So they're just looking at their gross revenues coming in and not on the other side when they say, oh, sales were up and things, which is great. But if we have a change in legislation that impacts how many people come into the liquor store, then that could drop those sales. And so I feel like we're a little bit at odds right now. But once we have some clarity with that, we could potentially make some adjustments next year. I know it's a very conservative approach.
How much in dollars do they need to carry over from one year to another? 100,000?
Well, and that was something I thought of a couple days ago and went, we should probably come up with what that amount is and maybe look at other municipals and see if they have a policy or something that we can look at just for starting that conversation and then come up with that number. So
The only reason I stress that is the reason the liquor store was instigated a couple of years ago was to bring down the cost of us doing business here in the levy. And if we can't do that reasonably, then something's not right. I don't know, $100,000 for inventory and everything else, if that's what they normally keep, and we end up with over $300,000, yeah, we should take more out. But maybe that should wait till finally the December meeting to figure that out.
Well, I think one thing you got to look at too is, it's like insurance, if you want a 5-year actuarial. So you go back 5 years and you say, okay, year 1 and 2, they were just rocking. Year 3 and 4, boy, it wasn't good. Year 5, we got rocking again, and you average it out. When you're talking about what that dollar amount should be, you don't want to find yourself too low on a bad year, and all of a sudden we got to kick money in to buy inventory or something. I mean, I don't know how it all works with retail business. I always worked on the bottom end of retail, so but yeah, I think you're right though. We should set a dollar amount, and I think that's a good thing to do is set it at what it needs to be, and maybe. Ross, you've been in retail your whole life. Maybe you can speak to that better.
I just think that we need to be smart about it. We need to look at the past. I want to say it was around 200,000 that we kept in the checkbook, but it's been a while since I've looked at that. But because that's the thing is that you want to do is if for some reason the economy or whatever, you want to make sure you have enough in there to, and I agree it should be looked at and gone through, but I think it should be carefully looked at and not, and just done with a lot of forethought.
But I think Don's right. The purpose of the liquor store and the pickle
was
to supplement the city's income, not.
And it does give us $235,000 a year, which is no small, so it is doing that. Now, can we maximize that? I think that's where we need to look into it and see.
What would probably be a smart idea would be sometime after the first of the year, while it's still kind of quiet, is to have some workshops and discuss what prudent reserves are for the unreserved and for the liquor, and then look to set what those reserves should be, because I don't know that we've ever really done that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned earlier on that in the unreserved we were going to do something later and maybe have a workshop. Just a suggestion, if we had it sometime in November when you had a better idea on what the liquor revenue was rather than now, we could talk about that, and then we could talk about the reserve fund and the money that's in there and how much and where it's going. If we talked about those two items at a special workshop on the budget sometime in November, that might be a good idea to do that so we can really nail it down. Suggestion.
Well, I just to kind of reply to that, I tend to like the idea of having the meeting sooner than later. I just don't know what the staff's schedule and ability is between now and the end of the year. If it's available, I think it's,
that's a meeting that we should have.
Yeah, I do too. I'm just thinking later in the year, closer to when we have to set the budget, so we'll have a better picture of what is actually out there rather than guessing at this point. That's all.
That could give us an opportunity too to, if we all agree, to maybe even reduce that levy a little more
Yeah.
to all of our likings if we can, hopefully we can.
Yeah, there's also the concern, and this is where a workshop's really the place to dig into this discussion. If we use a fair chunk of, those reserves this year, and in a sense artificially lower it, the levy, which isn't a bad idea, it could come back in the future to where we can't hold it that low, and then so to do too much in 1 year may or may not be wise. And I think just to have rather than trying to do it right in the middle of a different meeting, to get together and talk about it as a lone topic, I think would make sense. Because I totally agree that, I think it's probably time that the city have some discussion on what prudent reserves are.
Yeah. Well, if it's accurate that we have several $1 million in that unreserved fund, and we have a special meeting as you were talking about, it'd be good to know what's the dollar amount that's in there, what it's reserved for, and how much legally we have to have, so we have a little bit better picture. That's all I'm saying.
Jenny, would that be possible for you to get that information to the council outside of that, having that meeting? I mean, just pull it together and just get it out to us, email it to us, or whatever
I sure can.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
That at least what we have, because there isn't a lot as far as designated funds and things like that. So that's a very simple, here's the information. And then I think the conversation is, what should those amounts be? Should we be adding certain things? We haven't historically talked about reserving funds in the liquor fund, which we should, because we have buildings to maintain and we have some of those as well. So we have to think about that when we're setting that amount for the liquor fund. But certainly that would be fine.
I think
Yep.
that would be kind of a good jump start,
Okay.
in a sense, because then if we saw that, then, it'd give us all something a little bit more to help solidify what we're thinking. I think those are good points. Another thing, that's going to come up next year now is, and I'm just going to put it out there because it's in a way attached to this discussion, and that is we have, according to the newspaper anyway, $50 million worth of new construction. Well, what is that $50 million going to do as far as property taxes goes, and how is that going to impact what the city and the county and the school district will be receiving? So at some point in time, and I've talked with Jenny about this, we're going to want to see, or try to figure out where that's going, because as a city, as well as the county and the school district, we should see some sort of an increase from that. So
Probably not so much next year, probably more
2
so
years.
It's 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
It's going to definitely be,
But the point is, it's not something to plan on, but, when we're talking about, moving chess pieces around, I think that sort of workshop thing, just to talk about a lot of issues like that would be good. Ross?
I had a conversation with Jenny about this, and, I'm probably going to pick on you, Mayor, a little bit here, but looking back on the 4 years that I've been here, I know when you ran, because we had a conversation about it, we were going to try to lower, you wanted to try and lower the budget by 2%. That first year, which we won't get into the meetings of there, but the second year, when you were mayor, you came up with a number like 2.whatever% to be the increase, and somebody asked how you got there, and you said something about the stars and the moon. And then this year, when we're sitting at 9%, somebody made a comment from the last meeting, and it's kind of like it's just the cost of doing business. We have to do an increase. And my point is, and it's kind of all of us, that's not, the two businesses that I've been most with, they have an accountant that sits down with them and tells them, this is what you have, this is where you have, this is what we think you should do, and they plan out and they do. And we all just, every year, we kind of look at it and we kind of balance it. And this budget's way different than any business budget I've ever been with. And I've talked to some other people who's been on councils, Mark Ron being one of them, and he agreed. In like last year, I didn't even figure out about this reserve until I was listening to our accountants talking about it. And then I'm like, what are you talking about? So I went into Jenny, and then, John and I had a meeting with Jenny and found out, we've been sitting on this reserve. And so my point is, and we have this accountant, we have this person here in Jenny, but what we need to start doing is we need to start planning for the future. We need to start, not just bouncing all around, well, this year, let's try to lower it. This year, we're going to do this. Now, this year, if you look back, I would probably say the 2 previous years, we haven't added enough to the budget. And now we get to this year, because costs have been increasing everything. Now we got to do this 9% budget. But my point is, every year, we're just bouncing around, and there's I've never heard a plan down the road, and I've asked a lot of questions. I understand more about the budget than I ever did when I first started, but it's taken me 4 years. Especially when my eyes were wide open when I found out, I don't know how many, we had, we got $4 million in reserve, And so we really need to start looking down the road. We need to start planning, and we need to start making smart decisions of what we're going to do with our money. And not just this year to year, we get together for a budget, we go through it, can you raise this, can you lower this, and that's kind of what we've done. And so, for whatever that's worth, I think we have that person here with Jenny to do this. Like I said, every business I've been at, they meet twice a year or more than that with their accountants. And they tell them, that person tells them, this is what I think you should do, this is what I think you should do. And I don't see where we've had that in the city council. So I think if we can allow Jenny to do this, I think she can do it, but then we sidetrack her with all this other stuff, which is a whole nother subject. So this takes, this just needs more time, and it needs more thought and planning, and not just at the year. Well, because even now we're looking at saying, okay, can we take money from, the liquor store? Don't know. This all needs to be figured out and planned for. So we're planning this year, 10 years, and 50 years down the road. And I don't know, that's just my thought. I'm probably rambling here at the end, but I just reflected back on it, and I think that we're doing this all wrong. And that's just my 2 cents on it. And I also think that we have a person here who can really help us with this in Jenny. But we need to designate her the time to put in it and not keep sidetracking her with all this other stuff. So
What others?
I'm not going to get into that, but I mean, I don't think we're using Jenny's time efficiently.
At this meeting or outside?
No, outside of this, but we're not going to, we just need, all I'm saying is we need to give Jenny the time. We need to make this an important thing to give her the time so that we can be consistent. We should really should know our increase a year ahead of time of what we're really going to be thinking for an increase in for the budget. I mean, I think there just needs to be more forethought into this and not just kind of, what do we mean by we're saying, well, we looked at the stars and the moon and came up with this raise? I mean, what is that? I don't know. I'm just gonna leave it at that for food for thought.
But I also think that what we need to do as a council is to give her some direction, some guidance on what we would like to see, and then let her work her magic with her calculator and whatever she does. But I think she needs some direction rather than just give us a budget,
I think if we could give all the department heads kind of like a first of the year, maybe even May-ish time of the year, hey, we'd kind of like to, if we could let her know where we'd like to see the next levy increase come in, then they can start working on something.
Guys,
So,
I kind of agree with that, but we need to figure out where we're at.
I did have one question on one item.
Okay, if it's related to the
Item H.
meeting.
Item H, yes.
Item H, on the Parks Department truck. I
Yes.
did mention, I know he asked for $10,000 to buy a used truck. Honestly, and I would just ask everyone to keep an open mind on this, with state bid, talking to Terry and
Matthew?
Thank you, Terry and Matthew, for what they're looking for a vehicle, they could probably, somewhere in the $17,000 range, get a brand-new truck off state bid. 17 under, okay, because they're looking for a single cab work truck, 3/4 ton. The only reason they're looking for 3/4 ton is there's about a handful of times out of the year that you really got to have a 3/4 ton. But when they do need it, they really need that. They're not looking at a plow truck or using it for anything like that. So I'm just, again, thinking, I just ask you all to, as we come around and we get around to the workshops and everything, just to think about that a little bit. And the new bids aren't out yet.
Correct.
They should be out by November, if I'm not mistaken. They should be out sometime in November, no later than December 1st, the new state bid list because the 2019s are already out. So
So
that list
so
should
that's
be-
something we can look at. Same with, seeing what's left over at the end of the year and putting some funds aside if we have them left over
and
in his
Tom-
budget. We
You and
can-
Tom can help Matthew with that
Yep,
if he's never
we
dealt
can do
with
that.
state bid before.
Yep, absolutely. So-
Mr. Mayor, just for my information, as we go forward now, what is your plan? Are we going to have another workshop or not, or just what are you planning?
Well, I think that, in my mind, it's yet to be determined at this meeting, depending on how far we get here, but I would certainly think we would, my initial gut feeling is we probably will have another meeting.
Okay, similar to what we're doing
Yes,
tonight?
correct.
I'm fine with that. I think it's a great idea to talk about fund balance amounts, reserves, and I can put together some information. I'm thinking at first glance with the election and then with a regular council meeting the week of Thanksgiving, maybe we look at the last week of November. We could just look at schedules and I can maybe throw out some dates to the council and we can, pin down a date, but that would be, have that conversation before we go into December and all the final meetings would be great.
But, as I agree, in a sense with what you were referring to, Don, and that is, we do need to give direction, some direction to the city administrator to help pull this together. The question is, if we want to cut much more, we need to have a deeper conversation about what to really cut. And are we willing to have that conversation? Because if all we're going to look at is just surface little things, we're pretty much where we're at, unless we use unreserved funds,
Right.
which certainly we can do some of that. But the reality is that, and I am not opposed to that, but at the same time, we're not really looking at doing anything really meaningful. Any reserves that are used is still a Band-Aid to what the budget really is. So if we want to, long-term, make a difference, we may need to get deeper into this, and there has to be a willingness to do that.
True, but for this coming year, the coming budget, I think looking at the reserve fund is something we should before we make a final decision.
And I'm
That's
sure
all
we
I'm
will,
saying.
And I'm sure we will. Jenny will get that information out to us.
Yeah. Jenny, just, this may be not part of this or not, but normally the league and the state wants the cities to have 35 to 37% in cash between when you get your real estate payments in. Are we maintaining that?
We do have that, yes,
That's
absolutely.
separate from the reserve fund.
No, that is the,
That is still part of the
yes,
reserve
but
fund?
I believe I believe the Office of the State Auditor recommends 6 months
Yeah,
because our first settlement doesn't come in until June, so you have to have 6 months worth of funds on hand to pay your bills until then. But yes, we do have more than that, so we
Okay.
are in good shape as far as that goes. Yeah. So, well, that's all I have, so
Okay.
thank you for the conversation, and we'll we'll carry on for next month. Bring it back. Okay, great.
For a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'm having so much fun, I don't want to adjourn.
You're feeling too good these days.
I don't know.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.